The holographic displays in Pod 27 flickered as Ava Morgan adjusted the final calibration sequences. Her fingers, nimble despite the standard-issue Academy gloves, danced across the translucent control panel. The soft blue glow illuminated her face, highlighting the determined set of her jaw and the focused intensity in her eyes. Outside the curved viewport, the gas giant Vesper 9 hung like a massive ornament, its swirling atmosphere of amber and violet casting an otherworldly light across the laboratory. Earthchild, the Academy students called her, sometimes with curiosity, often with derision. The Orbital Academy of Xenochemical Arts attracted the brightest minds from across 17 galactic sectors, beings whose understanding of molecular manipulation often bordered on the mystical. And then there was Ava, human, stubborn, and perpetually fascinated by what her peers considered embarrassingly primitive science. The ring station that housed the Academy completed another rotation, bringing the distant sun into view. Its light, filtered through specialized panels, cast long shadows across the laboratory floor. Ava checked her chronometer. Third cycle of the semester. Day 42. The Cascade Convergence Challenge would begin in less than 6 hours, and she had only just secured this out-of-the-way pod after 3 days of bureaucratic wrangling. "Computer, run simulation sequence Alpha 7, she commanded, her voice steady despite her nerves. Simulation Alpha 7 initiated," replied the artificial intelligence, its voice calibrated to sound pleasantly neutral to all species capable of auditory processing. Warning: proposed reaction parameters indicate 98.7% probability of failure by Academy standards. Ava smiled. Noted. Continue. The holographic display expanded, showing molecular structures interacting in slow motion. Simple compounds, by galactic standards. Nothing like the exotic materials her classmates would be working with. No quantum unstable isotopes or consciousness-altering catalysts. Just sodium bicarbonate and acetic acid, baking soda and vinegar. A soft chime announced an incoming communication. Ava sighed and accepted the call. "Hey, Earthchild," came the familiar, slightly gelatinous voice of Zirvok. The Xenagel specialist's translucent features rippled with barely concealed amusement. "Heard you finally got assigned a pod? The maintenance closet was full?" "Pod 27 suits my needs perfectly," Ava replied, keeping her tone neutral. The Academy encouraged friendly competition, but Zirvok had always taken it several steps further. "How's your quantum gel detonation coming along?" The gelatinous features hardened momentarily. "Don't worry about my project. I'm just calling to make sure you know the parameters for tomorrow. You can't use any exotic compounds or catalysts. Professor Dralkor was very specific. Only inert, non-alien reagents." "I'm aware of the parameters," Ava said, resisting the urge to point out that she was probably the only student who didn't need to adjust her approach because of that particular rule. "Good luck, then." Zirvok's features rippled in what passed for laughter among their species. "I'm sure you're... what was it again? Kitchen science? I'm sure it will be absolutely groundbreaking." The communication ended, and Ava turned back to her work, refusing to let the barb sink in. She'd heard worse since arriving at the Academy 3 cycles ago. The human approach to chemistry was considered quaint at best, a cosmic joke at worst. While other species manipulated matter at the quantum level or synthesized compounds that defied conventional physics, humans were still largely working with the building blocks of their own planet. And that was precisely what made her approach unique. "Computer, access atmospheric analysis from simulation pods 1 through 26, focusing on trace element dispersal patterns following student demonstrations. Accessing. Warning. This crosses privacy thresholds for academic work." Ava nodded. "Override Morgan 793. Educational Fair Use Protocol." She wasn't stealing anyone's work. She was simply mapping what everyone left behind. Every exotic experiment released trace elements into the Academy's carefully regulated atmosphere. Individually, they were harmless and quickly filtered out. But collectively, they created patterns, invisible webs of molecular potential that nobody bothered to observe. The holographic display shifted, showing ghostly trails of particulate matter. Ava leaned forward, analyzing the dance of molecules that nobody else seemed to care about. The remnants of failed experiments, the exhaust of successful ones, all of it formed an invisible ecosystem of chemical possibility. "That's it," she whispered, as the pieces began to align in her mind. Computer, overlay pressure differential maps for the demonstration hall during peak usage hours. This wasn't just about making a volcano model. This was about turning the entire demonstration hall into her laboratory. As the new data appeared, Ava's lips curved into a smile. The Academy taught that complexity was the path to innovation, layer upon layer of exotic compounds and intricate catalysts. But sometimes, the simplest trigger could set off the most profound cascade. She worked through the night, mapping pressure curves, calculating valve delays, and designing mixing sequences. By the time the station's lights shifted to morning cycle, she had her plan. The Orbital Academy's demonstration hall was an architectural marvel, a geodesic dome whose transparent panels offered a panoramic view of Vesper Nava's swirling storms. The gas giant's gravitational influence was carefully counterbalanced, allowing for precise control of the environmental conditions within the hall. Students and faculty filed in, conversations buzzing with excitement and nervous energy. Ava stood by her assigned presentation station, a simple pedestal surrounded by sensor arrays and holographic projectors. Around her, other students were setting up far more elaborate displays, crystalline structures that hummed with potential energy, containment fields housing swirling masses of exotic matter, and in Ziervok's case, a pulsating orb of iridescent gel suspended in a gravity null field. Professor Dralkor entered last, his tall, angular form commanding immediate attention. The Vesperidian's exoskeleton gleamed under the hall's lights, the intricate patterns etched into its surface, marking him as a master of hyper-resonant catalysis. 6 pairs of manipulator appendages folded neatly against his thorax as he surveyed the assembled students. "Welcome to the Cascade Convergence Challenge." His voice resonated without electronic amplification, a natural ability of his species. "Today, you will demonstrate your understanding of fundamental reaction principles, using only inert, non-alien reagents. The winner will gain exclusive access to the zero-point synthesis chamber and a council research grant." His compound eyes swept across the room, pausing momentarily on Ava. "Some of you may find these limitations challenging, but constraints breed creativity, do they not? You have each selected your base materials. You will present in numerical order by station." Ava was station 27. She would go last. For the next 3 hours, she watched as her classmates unveiled their creations. A Medusan student had developed a crystalline lattice that, when exposed to a specific resonance frequency, shattered in a controlled pattern before reforming in a more complex configuration. The Silicene twins, Xena Prime and Xena Second, demonstrated a remarkable reaction where silicon-based compounds appeared to develop rudimentary neural patterns before dissolving back into inert matter. Ziervok's presentation drew particularly enthusiastic murmurs. The Xenagel specialist had created a compound that responded to sound waves by forming 3-dimensional representations of the acoustic patterns, essentially seeing sound in physical space. Through it all, Ava observed not just the presentations, but the invisible aftermath of each demonstration. With each reaction, new trace elements entered the hall's atmosphere. With each failure or success, the molecular landscape shifted slightly. She made minute adjustments to her calculations, fingers dancing across her portable scanner, disguised as standard note-taking equipment. Station 27. Professor Dralcor announced finally. Cadet Morgan. Ava approached the central demonstration area, carrying a single flask containing a clear liquid. Murmurs rippled through the audience. After the spectacles they had witnessed, her simple container seemed almost insultingly basic. My demonstration utilizes sodium bicarbonate and acetic acid, she announced, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. Someone snickered. Professor Dralcor's exoskeleton shifted in what might have been a sigh. Earth compounds, he noted, commonly known as baking soda and vinegar, Professor, Ava replied, refusing to feel embarrassed. More laughter now, less restrained. Zervok's gelatinous form rippled with amusement. Proceed, Cadet, Professor Dralcor said, his tone making it clear he expected little. Ava placed her flask on the central pedestal and activated the holographic display. What I'm about to demonstrate isn't just about these two compounds interacting. It's about how they interact with everything else in this environment. She tapped a sequence into the control panel, and the flask's contents began to bubble gently. The reaction between sodium bicarbonate and acetic acid produces carbon dioxide, water, and sodium acetate. Simple chemistry, by any standard. The bubbling increased, foam rising to the top of the flask, but not spilling over. Precisely controlled. But this demonstration hall contains trace elements from 26 previous experiments. Quantum residue, molecular echoes, and atmospheric anomalies that most detection systems filter out as background noise. She tapped another sequence, and the foam began to pulse with a soft blue light. I've calibrated my reaction to interact with those trace elements, not to neutralize them or contain them, but to amplify them, to create connections. The light from the foam intensified, and suddenly, ghostly trails of luminescence appeared in the air throughout the hall. The invisible made visible. Patterns of molecular interaction that had been present all along, but that no one had bothered to see. Gasps rippled through the audience as the trails began to pulse, in synchronized rhythm, with the foam in Ava's flask. The holographic displays around the hall flickered, picking up unexpected data points. The carbon dioxide released is carrying specially charged particles that are interacting with the quantum residue from Station 8's crystal array demonstration, Ava explained, as a particularly bright pattern formed above the Silicene Twins station. And here, she pointed to another forming pattern. The sodium acetate is creating a template that's organizing the dispersed microorganisms from Station 14's bioreaction. Throughout the hall, previously invisible interactions were coming to life, a symphony of chemical reactions that had been playing silently all along. The central holographic display struggled to keep up with the cascade of data as patterns formed, dissolved, and reformed in increasing complexity. Professor Dralcor stepped forward, his compound eyes focused intently on the phenomenon unfolding around them. One pair of manipulator appendages extended, holding a personal scanner that hummed with activity. This is, he began, then stopped as the scanner produced results that clearly surprised him. Cadet Morgan, you've created a self-sustaining catalytic matrix using atmospheric residue as a framework. The patterns were growing more complex now, linking and branching in ways that even Ava hadn't fully anticipated. The dome above them pulsed with synchronized color shifts as the reaction influenced the photoresponsive elements in the transparent panels. Not created, Professor, Ava corrected gently. Revealed. These interactions were always possible. We just needed the right key to see them. For 5 full minutes, the hall remained transfixed as the cascade continued to evolve, revealing layer after layer of interconnected reactions. Then, as precisely as it had begun, the phenomenon began to fade, the patterns dispersing back into invisibility, the foam in Ava's flask settling into inert liquid. Silence fell over the demonstration hall. Even Ziervok's usually mobile features had stilled in astonishment. Professor Dralkor's exoskeleton clicked softly as he processed what he had witnessed. Cadet Morgan, your demonstration is difficult to quantify by standard metrics. You have not created a new compound or demonstrated mastery of exotic catalysis. Ava's heart sank despite her certainty that her demonstration had been successful beyond her expectations. However, the professor continued, you have revealed an entirely new approach to understanding chemical interactions. By focusing on what others discard as background noise, you have shown us a web of connections that challenges our fundamental assumptions about isolated reactions. He turned to address the entire hall. The Cascade Convergence Challenge asks us to find new paths forward within constraints. Cadet Morgan has not merely worked within those constraints. She has transformed them into her greatest asset. His compound eyes turned back to Ava. Report to my laboratory at the conclusion of this session. We have much to discuss. As the crowd dispersed, some students casting bewildered glances her way, others approaching with newfound respect. Ava remained by her simple flask. She had come to the academy to learn from the greatest xenochemical minds in the galaxy. Instead, she had taught them to see what had been in front of them all along. Congratulations, Earthchild, came Ziervok's voice from behind her. The Xenagel specialist's tone lacked its usual mockery. That was unexpected. Thank you, Ava replied, surprised by the sincerity she detected. How did you know it would work? That the residual elements would form those patterns? Ava considered the question. I didn't know exactly what patterns would form, but I knew they would form something. Everything leaves a trace. Ziervok, everything connects. If you're looking for the connections. The Xenagel specialist's form rippled thoughtfully. Perhaps there is something to your earth science after all. As Ziervok moved away, Ava carefully packed up her equipment. The simple flask, now containing nothing more remarkable than the byproducts of a basic acid-base reaction, had just changed the course of her academic career, and perhaps the direction of research at the academy itself. Professor Dralkor's laboratory occupied an entire section of the academy's research wing, a sprawling complex of interconnected chambers filled with equipment so advanced that some of it defied easy categorization. Ava had never been invited inside before. Few first-cycle students ever were. She stood before the entrance, gathering her courage before placing her palm on the identification panel. The door slid open silently, revealing a space that seemed to exist at the intersection of laboratory, art installation, and alien ecosystem. Transparent tubes carried liquids of impossible colors between bubbling vessels. Holographic displays showed molecular structures rotating and interacting in real time. In one corner, what appeared to be a small storm cloud was contained within a hexagonal field. Occasional flashes of lightning illuminating a collection of crystalline structures beneath it. Cadet Morgan, Professor Dralkor's voice came from deeper within the laboratory. Enter. She followed the sound, weaving between workstations, until she found the professor, standing before a wall-sized display, showing a recording of her demonstration. The patterns of luminescence played across the screen, now enhanced and analyzed by the laboratory's sophisticated systems. You have placed me in an unusual position, the professor said without preamble, his exoskeleton shifting subtly in what Ava had learned to recognize as deep thought. The zero-point synthesis chamber is typically reserved for advanced research into exotic matter states. No one has ever proposed using it to study background noise. With respect, Professor, it's not noise, Ava replied. It's a complex system of interactions that we've been trained to filter out. Imagine what we might discover if we actually studied these patterns instead of dismissing them. Professor Dralkor's manipulator appendages moved in a gesture that approximated a nod. Indeed, which is why I am granting you access to the chamber, as promised. However, I am also nominating you to present your findings to the Interchemical Council next cycle." Ava's eyes widened. "The council? But I'm only a first cycle student. I don't have the qualifications." "Qualifications," the professor interrupted, "are structures we create to maintain order in our understanding. Sometimes they serve us well. Other times, they become barriers to progress." His compound eyes fixed on her. "Today, you showed us that what we discard as irrelevant may in fact be essential. The council needs to hear this perspective." He turned back to the display, manipulating the controls to focus on a particular pattern sequence. "I must confess, Cadet Morgan, that I initially viewed your Earth-based approach as limited. I now see that my perspective was the one with limitations." "Thank you, Professor," Ava said, still processing the implications of his words. "Do not thank me yet," he replied, his tone suddenly serious. "The Council is not known for embracing radical shifts in methodology. Some members will resist the implications of your work. Others may attempt to appropriate it for their own purposes. Are you prepared for the scrutiny your discovery will face?" Ava thought about the years she had spent defending her interest in kitchen science, the mockery she had endured, the doubt she had sometimes felt herself. "I believe in what I've discovered, Professor. I'm ready to defend it." "Good," Professor Dralcor said, "because the true test begins now. I want you to develop a follow-up demonstration for the Council, something that builds on today's discovery, but takes it further. You have 1 cycle to prepare. 1 cycle, approximately 2 Earth months. It wasn't much time, especially considering she would still need to maintain her regular coursework. But it was an opportunity beyond anything she could have imagined when she first arrived at the Academy. "I won't disappoint you, Professor." "I know you won't, Cadet Morgan." His exoskeleton shifted again, this time in what might have been amusement. "After all, you've already proven that the simplest reactions can yield the most profound results." As Ava left the laboratory, her mind was already racing with possibilities. The zero-point synthesis chamber would allow her to study the interaction patterns with unprecedented precision. Perhaps she could even isolate some of the emergent compounds that had formed briefly during the cascade. There was so much to explore, so many connections waiting to be discovered. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she almost didn't notice the group of students waiting in the corridor outside her quarters. 6 of them, representing various species and academic focuses. At the center stood Xena Prime and Xena Second, their crystalline forms glittering under the corridor lights. "Cadet Morgan," the twins spoke in unison, their harmonized voices creating a pleasant resonance. "We wish to discuss your demonstration." Ava tensed slightly, unsure if this was the prelude to a confrontation. It wouldn't be the first time a successful presentation had made her the target of resentment. "What about it?" she asked cautiously. "Your catalyst matrix interacted most strongly with our silicon neural patterns," Xena Prime said. "We have been attempting to stabilize those patterns for 3 cycles without success," Xena Second continued. "Yet your simple Earth compounds created a stabilization field that persisted for 73 seconds. They concluded together. The other students nodded in agreement. A Medusan stepped forward, tentacles shifting in a gesture of respect. "We would like to collaborate," the Medusan said, "if you are willing." Ava blinked in surprise. "Collaborate with me?" "Your approach is unconventional," admitted a tall, feathered student whose name Ava couldn't immediately recall. "But it works. We want to understand how—" "And perhaps," added Xena Prime, "there are aspects of our work that could enhance your understanding as well." Ava looked at the group before her, students who had previously barely acknowledged her existence, now seeking her input. The change was as sudden as it was unexpected, but she recognized its significance. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about building bridges between different approaches to science, different ways of seeing the universe. "I'd like that," she said finally. But I should warn you, my methods involve a lot of observation and patience. It's not always exciting. The Medusan's tentacles rippled with what might have been laughter. After today's demonstration, Cadet Morgan, I think we can all agree that your definition of not exciting may need revision. As the group moved toward the common study area, discussing possibilities and sharing insights, Ava felt a shift in her own internal landscape. She had come to the academy hoping to be accepted, to prove that human science deserved respect. Now, she realized that wasn't enough. It wasn't about proving herself or defending Earth's scientific traditions. It was about building something new, a synthesis of approaches that transcended planetary boundaries. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. By day, Ava attended her regular classes. Her status among her peers transformed. By night, she worked in the zero-point synthesis chamber, exploring the properties of what she had begun to call interstitial reactions, chemical processes that occurred in the spaces between more visible phenomena. Professor Drelkor visited occasionally, offering insights and challenging her assumptions. Their conversations had evolved from the formal student-teacher dynamic into something approaching collaborative research. He still maintained his exacting standards, but there was a new respect in his manner that made Ava stand taller, think more boldly. The council session is in 3 days, he reminded her during one such visit. Chancellor Mirkai will be presiding. She has a particular interest in methodological innovation. Ava nodded, only half listening as she adjusted the parameters on her latest experiment. The zero-point chamber hummed around them, its specialized field generators creating conditions that would be impossible anywhere else on the station. I have been focusing on something unexpected, she said, gesturing to a holographic display where molecular structures rotated slowly. During the cascade reaction, there was a brief moment when several trace compounds merged to form a new substance. It only existed for milliseconds, but the chamber's sensors captured its structure. Professor Dralkor moved closer, his compound eyes focusing on the display. Interesting. This appears to be a form of reflective catalysis matrix, self-stabilizing, yet responsive to external stimuli. Exactly, Ava agreed. I've been calling it nullium because it seems to have no intrinsic properties of its own. Instead, it reflects and amplifies the properties of whatever it interacts with. A mirror compound, the professor mused. Highly unusual. Have you been able to synthesize a stable version? Ava's expression brightened. That's what I wanted to show you. Watch this. She activated a sequence on the control panel, and a small containment field at the center of the chamber illuminated. Within it, a droplet of silvery liquid hovered, its surface constantly shifting like quicksilver. Stable nullium, she announced proudly. It took 17 attempts, but I finally managed to create a synthesis pathway that maintains molecular cohesion outside of the cascade environment. Professor Dralkor extended one of his manipulator appendages, holding a sensor over the containment field. Remarkable. The compound is simultaneously reading as inert and highly reactive. It appears to be adapting to the scanning frequency. It adapts to whatever observes it, Ava explained. That's what makes it so fascinating. It's not just reflecting properties, it's reflecting perspective. The Medusan students see it as crystalline. The Silicene twins register it as silicon-compatible. Zyrvox scanners show it as gel-phase compatible. And to humans? The professor asked. Ava smiled. To me, it looks like water, the most common overlooked substance on Earth, the medium that enables most of our chemistry to occur. Professor Dralkor was silent for a long moment, his exoskeleton completely still in what Ava had learned indicated deep concentration. Finally, he spoke. Cadet Morgan, I believe you have discovered something profound. This compound, this nullium, represents more than a new material. It embodies the principle your work has been demonstrating all along. that our observations shape what we discover, and that the connections between systems may be more important than the systems themselves. He straightened to his full height. This is what you must present to the council, not just as a scientific curiosity, but as a new paradigm for xenochemical research. Ava felt the weight of his words settle over her. What had begun as a simple demonstration had evolved into something that could potentially reshape the Academy's approach to chemical science. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. "Do you think they'll understand the implications?" she asked. Professor Dralcor's manipulator appendages moved in a gesture that approximated a shrug. "Some will. Others will resist. Such is the nature of progress, Cadet Morgan. But the evidence you present will speak for itself." As he turned to leave, he added, "Prepare carefully for your presentation. The Council appreciates thoroughness. And be prepared for questions that challenge not just your discovery, but the very premise of your approach." After he had gone, Ava remained in the chamber, watching the silvery droplet of nullium as it hovered in its containment field. A compound that was nothing and everything, depending on who was looking at it. A perfect metaphor for her journey at the Academy. She had 3 days to prepare a presentation that might change the course of xenochemical research, or be dismissed as an interesting but irrelevant anomaly. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange calm. Whatever happened at the council, she had already proven what she set out to prove. That simplicity, wielded with insight, could indeed outperform elaborate complexity. The chamber's lights dimmed automatically as she logged her final observations for the day. Tomorrow, she would begin preparing her presentation. Tonight, she would allow herself to savor the pure joy of discovery. The Interchemical Council chamber was located at the very heart of the Academy ring station. A vast circular room whose dome ceiling offered an unobstructed view of the cosmos beyond. 12 elevated platforms arranged in a circle housed the council members, representatives of the major chemical traditions from across the galaxy. At the center was a presentation area, bathed in light from above, where supplicants could offer their discoveries for consideration. Ava stood at the threshold, her simple presentation case clutched tightly in her hands. Inside was a single vial of nullium, stabilized within a portable containment field, along with the data crystals that contained her research findings. She wore her formal Academy uniform, the dark blue material offset by the silver insignia that marked her as a first-cycle cadet. Professor Dralcor waited beside her, his exoskeleton polished to a high shine for the occasion. "Remember, Cadet Morgan, the Council values clarity and precision. Present your findings methodically, and do not allow interruptions to disrupt your narrative." Ava nodded, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. "I'm ready, Professor." They entered together, walking the long pathway to the center of the chamber. The council members watched their approach, their diverse physiologies making their expressions difficult to read. In the highest seat sat Chancellor Mirkai, a quantumite whose physical form existed partially in multiple probability states, giving her an indistinct, shimmering appearance. "Professor Dralcor," the Chancellor's voice resonated with harmonic overtones. "You have requested an extraordinary session of the Council to present a discovery by one of your students." "Indeed, Chancellor," Professor Dralcor replied, his own voice pitched to carry throughout the chamber. "I present Cadet Ava Morgan, whose work on interstitial chemical reactions has yielded significant results that merit Council attention." Chancellor Mirkai's form shifted slightly as her probability states realigned. "A first-cycle cadet. Unusual. Your species is human, correct?" "Yes, Chancellor," Ava confirmed, managing to keep her voice steady despite the intimidating surroundings. "Very well. You may proceed with your presentation, Cadet Morgan." Ava moved forward to the central platform, placing her case on the display pedestal that rose from the floor at her approach. The chamber's systems recognized her academy credentials, and holographic displays activated around her, ready to project her data. "Honorable Council," she began, "I come before you to present a discovery that challenges our understanding of chemical interactions and suggests new pathways for xenochemical research." She activated the first data crystal, and the displays showed recordings of her original demonstration in the Academy Hall. The luminescent patterns of the cascade reaction played out in the air above her. 3 weeks ago, I demonstrated how a simple reaction between sodium bicarbonate and acetic acid, earth compounds known as baking soda and vinegar, could be calibrated to interact with trace atmospheric elements from previous experiments. The result was a chemical cascade that revealed a complex web of interactions that had previously gone unnoticed. Several council members leaned forward, their interest piqued by the visual evidence. Ava continued, her confidence growing as she moved into the familiar territory of her research. "Using the zero-point synthesis chamber, I have been able to isolate and study these interstitial reactions in detail. My findings indicate that what we commonly filter out as background noise or irrelevant trace elements may in fact form a crucial connective tissue between chemical systems." She moved to the next phase of her presentation, displaying the molecular structures she had mapped during her research. "More significantly, I have discovered that under specific conditions, these interstitial reactions can give rise to a previously unknown compound with extraordinary properties." This was the moment. Ava opened her case and carefully removed the vial containing the nullium sample. As she placed it in the analysis field at the center of the platform, the holographic displays automatically began scanning and projecting its properties. "I call this substance nullium. It appears to have no fixed properties of its own, instead reflecting and adapting to the properties of whatever observes or interacts with it." Murmurs rippled through the council as the displays showed the compound's unusual readings. Each council member's personal display would be showing them a different analysis, tailored to their specific perceptual framework. Most remarkably, nullium seems to manifest differently depending on the observer's biological structure and perceptual apparatus. To silicon-based life forms, it appears silicon-compatible. To energy beings, it registers as a potential power source. To humans like myself, it resembles water, the foundational medium of Earth chemistry. Chancellor Mirkai's form flickered more rapidly, indicating intense interest. "Are you suggesting, Cadet Morgan, that this compound has some form of consciousness? That it actively adapts to observers?" "Not consciousness, Chancellor," Ava clarified. "Rather, it exists at a fundamental level of chemical responsiveness that transcends our usual categories. It doesn't choose how to appear. It simply manifests according to the observer's own chemical framework." A council member whose body consisted primarily of crystalline structures spoke next, voice chiming like glass bells. "This has profound implications for our understanding of objective chemical analysis. If the observer influences the observed at this level, how can we establish universal standards?" "With respect, Council Member," Ava replied, "I believe that question reflects exactly the paradigm shift this discovery suggests. Perhaps universal standards are less important than understanding the interconnections between different perceptual frameworks." She gestured to the nullium sample, still hovering in its containment field. "This compound doesn't invalidate objective analysis. It reveals a deeper layer of reality where subjective perception and objective properties meet. It shows us that the boundaries we draw between chemical systems may be more permeable than we've acknowledged." For the next hour, Ava fielded questions from the council, explaining her methodology, defending her conclusions, and outlining potential applications for her discovery. Some members were clearly skeptical, their questions pointed and challenging. Others seemed captivated by the possibilities, already extrapolating how nullium might be used in their own research traditions. Finally, Chancellor Mirkai raised a shimmering appendage, signaling an end to the questioning. Cadet Morgan, your presentation has given this council much to consider. It is not often that a first-cycle student challenges our fundamental assumptions so directly. Her tone made it impossible to tell whether this was a compliment or a criticism. Ava stood straighter, awaiting the Chancellor's verdict. The discovery of this nullium compound is significant in itself, the Chancellor continued. But the methodological approach that led to its discovery may be even more valuable. Your focus on what others discard, on the connections between systems, rather than the systems themselves, represents a perspective that has been underrepresented in Academy research. The Chancellor's form solidified slightly, coalescing into a more defined shape, a sign of a definitive decision being reached. Therefore, it is the decision of this Council to establish a new research initiative focused on interstitial chemical processes, with Cadet Morgan appointed as human advisor. Ava's breath caught in her throat. This was more than she had dared to hope for. Furthermore, the Chancellor added, we recognize that this discovery might not have been possible without the unique perspective that Earth science brings to our collective knowledge. As such, the Academy curriculum will be revised to include methodologies from all member worlds, regardless of their technological advancement level. She turned her attention to Professor Dralcor. Professor, your recognition of Cadet Morgan's potential speaks well of your discernment. The Council entrusts you with overseeing the implementation of these curriculum changes. Professor Dralcor's exoskeleton shifted in what Ava now recognized as pleased surprise. The Academy will benefit greatly from this broader perspective. Chancellor, I accept this responsibility with gratitude. As the formal session concluded and the Council members began to disperse, Ava carefully repacked her nullium sample. The magnitude of what had just occurred was still sinking in. Not only had her discovery been recognized, but it had catalyzed institutional change at the highest levels of the Academy. Chancellor Mirkai descended from her elevated platform, her form shimmering as she approached Ava. Up close, the Quantumite's presence was even more disconcerting, parts of her shifting in and out of perceptibility as probability waves fluctuated. Cadet Morgan. The Chancellor's voice was softer now, the harmonic overtones gentler. I have observed your species with interest since Earth joined the Galactic Scientific Consortium. Humans possess a particular talent for seeing connections, where others see only chaos. Thank you, Chancellor, Ava replied, unsure how else to respond to such an observation. Your discovery today reminds us all that progress often comes not from increasing complexity, but from a willingness to look where others do not. The Chancellor's form solidified further, a rare occurrence that indicated deep certainty. The Academy needs this reminder periodically. We become too enamored with our own sophistication, too dismissive of simpler approaches. She gestured toward the vial of nullium. This substance you've created, it will have many applications, some of which you may not have anticipated. Use it wisely, Cadet Morgan, and continue to bring your unique perspective to our collective endeavors. With that, the Chancellor's form dispersed again into its usual probability cloud, and she moved away, leaving Ava to contemplate her words. Professor Dralcor approached, his exoskeleton clicking softly in what Ava had learned was his equivalent of a chuckle. It seems you have made quite an impression. Cadet Morgan, Chancellor Mirkai rarely speaks to presenters directly after council sessions. It's all a bit overwhelming, Ava admitted. When I came to the Academy, I just wanted to prove that Earth science deserved respect. I never imagined that you would help reshape our understanding of chemical interactions. The professor finished for her. Perhaps that is precisely why you succeeded. You were not constrained by the weight of our traditions and expectations. They began walking together toward the chamber exit, their steps echoing in the now empty space. What happens now? Ava asked. With the research initiative, I mean, now, Professor Dralkor replied. You continue your studies, but with expanded resources and responsibilities. Your advisor role will require you to collaborate with researchers from various disciplines who wish to explore interstitial chemistry. And of course, there is the matter of further investigating the properties and potential applications of nullium. Ava nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. I've been thinking about that. If nullium reflects the observer's chemical framework, it might serve as a bridge between incompatible chemical systems. Species whose biochemistry would normally prevent collaboration might be able to work together using nullium as an interface. An intriguing hypothesis, the professor agreed. Worth investigating further. As they reached the exit, he turned to her, his compound eyes focusing intently. One final observation, Cadet Morgan. Today, you have earned the respect of the Council and secured a place in the Academy's future. But success brings its own challenges. There will be those who seek to appropriate your work, to bend it toward their own purposes. Others will resist the changes your discovery represents. I understand, Professor, Ava said, recognizing the seriousness of his warning. Good. Remember what brought you here. Not a desire for recognition, but a genuine curiosity about the connections between things. That curiosity will serve you well in the cycles to come. With that, he departed, leaving Ava alone with her thoughts and the precious vial of nullium. She stood for a moment, looking back at the council chamber with its view of the endless cosmos beyond. Somewhere out there was Earth, so distant now, both in space and in her own development. Yet its lessons, the value of simplicity, the power of observation, the importance of seeing connections, remained at the core of who she was as a scientist. The journey ahead would not be easy. Reshaping entrenched methodologies never was. But she had proven that even the simplest reaction, approached with insight and patience, could trigger a cascade that transformed an entire system. 2 days later, Ava returned to Pod 27, the out-of-the-way laboratory sphere where her journey had begun, though she now had access to far more sophisticated facilities. There was something comforting about the familiar space. She had arranged for several hours of uninterrupted time, logging her purpose simply as independent research. The pod systems hummed to life as she entered, holographic displays illuminating at her approach. She placed her equipment case on the central workstation and began unpacking. A few simple containers, her portable scanner, and a small vial of nullium, its silvery contents shifting gently within the containment field. Computer, disable routine logging and enter research privacy mode, she commanded. Authorization, Morgan 793. Research privacy mode engaged, the AI confirmed. Warning, protocol requires statement of research, purpose for record. Ava smiled. Purpose, unguided experimentation. No specific objective. No grant requirements. No expected outcomes. There was a brief pause as the AI processed this unusual declaration. Acknowledged. Sensors calibrated for observation only. No evaluation parameters set. This was what she needed. Space to explore without the weight of expectations, without the pressure of formal research protocols. Her work with nullium would continue, of course. The Council's initiative would ensure that. But here, in this quiet pod, she could pursue curiosity for its own sake. She opened a small container, revealing a familiar white powder, sodium bicarbonate. Beside it, she placed a vial of clear liquid, acetic acid, the same simple components that had started everything. Back to basics, she murmured, a smile playing at her lips. But this time, she wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. This time, she was simply following her curiosity, seeing where it might lead. Perhaps nowhere significant. Perhaps to the next revolution in xenochemical understanding. Either way, the journey itself was what mattered. As the gas giant Vesper 9 completed another of its endless rotations outside the viewport. Ava Morgan began her next experiment. No brief, no grant, only curiosity. And in that moment, she was more certain than ever that she had found her place in the cosmos, not as an Earthchild struggling for acceptance, but as a scientist whose unique perspective might help bridge worlds of understanding. The simple flask before her contained nothing more extraordinary than baking soda and vinegar. But, as she had proven to the Academy and to herself, sometimes the simplest beginnings led to the most profound discoveries. She activated the reaction sequence, watching as the first bubbles began to form. Whatever happened next would be a surprise, a step into the unknown, guided only by observation and insight. And that, Ava thought, was the truest expression of science, regardless of what world it came from. As the reaction progressed, casting prismatic reflections across the laboratory walls, Ava settled in to watch, observe, and wonder, continuing the endless cycle of curiosity that connected her to every scientist who had ever looked at the ordinary and glimpsed the extraordinary hiding within.